Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are today. My name is Eugene Cho, and I'm here today with Gleb Balmatov from Cypress IO. And today we're going to be doing a joint webinar talking a little bit about CircleCI and Cypress Orbs and showing how the two can work together to kind of link together your end-to-end testing build, test, deploy process, including end-to-end, basically front-end testing. So to give a quick introduction to the agenda, we're going to start with some introductions a little bit deeper about each of us and our roles and kind of what we're working on. I'll be then jumping into an introduction to CircleCI and what you'll be able to accomplish using CircleCI, as well as an introduction to Orbs, which is one of the key features of CircleCI. Through which we're able to bring on partners such as partner functionality such as Cypress's. I'll then hand it over to Gleb, who will be giving a product overview of Cypress and then walking through how Cypress works together with CircleCI Orbs. After which we'll be doing Q&A. You'll see there's a handy little Zoom function a handy Q&A function within Zoom. So we may try to answer questions on the way, but most likely we'll be getting to your questions at the end of this presentation. Great. So I guess I'll introduce myself first. My name is Eugene Cho, the kind of regional manager of customer engineering here, based at our Tokyo office, CircleCI. And I work with our customers on a daily basis to help them get running with CircleCI, but also to educate everyone on the best way to implement CircleCI, as well as the benefits of implementing CI/CD in your team and organization. Gleb?
Hi, everyone. I'm VP of Engineering at Cypress, Gleb Bakhmutov. I used Cypress for a year before I joined the company, which was 3.5 years ago. And I'm the author of Cypress CircleCI Orb. So everything we'll be talking about is dear to my heart, and I'm really excited about this topic.
Fantastic. All right. So to introduce CircleCI in a really, really simple manner, CircleCI's mission is to make it as easy as possible to go from idea to delivery. And the ethos behind that is basically we want to enable our users to be able to build anything anywhere. So no matter what language you're writing in, whatever environment you're building your software in, wherever you're deploying it to, at the end of the day, we want to enable software engineering teams to be able to do that as painlessly and quickly as possible. And particularly for those teams, let's say, I think the key focus for most of you out there is to kind of build a product that delights your customers, delights your users, delights your end users. So perhaps spending time wrestling with your infrastructure, with your build, test, deploy pipeline is not necessarily something that is going to delight your customers. Rather, it's something that is a little bit of overhead work. So at CircleCI, we're really trying to help enable teams to be able to focus on those things that delight their customers. A quick introduction to CircleCI. We're founded around 9 years ago, and we're getting very, very close to 400 employees now, which is quite a big mark. I joined a little over 3 years ago, and it was less than 100 at the time, so it's kind of been really cool to see the company grow. We're distributed globally across 5 continents. I think we're still missing Africa, I think will be one of them. But otherwise, especially as a support organization, we have representatives all around the world, so we're able to provide around-the-clock coverage. We help teams build better software quicker, more reliably. And how we do that, how we enable it, is by having the world's largest shared CI/CD platform, where we're able to see over 1 million builds a day running on our platform, and that number continues to go up. So, we consider ourselves to be subject matter experts in the space, and having insights into how customers use our product, but then also getting the feedback from customers enables us to be able to improve and iterate quickly on the product, and to make sure that we are answering all of our user requests and building things, again, that delight our customers in its own way. So the names that you see below are some of our key customers that we're allowed to share publicly. So it's not just small teams and small startups, but rather large enterprise organizations also that are trusting us to run their software in the cloud as well as behind their firewall. So For those of you out there who have used CI/CD before, this probably is not much of a not much of a surprise to most of you. But I think it's useful to kind of go through this to kind of highlight, where CircleCI sits in the tool chain and to better understand our product. So basically, you have your VCS, your version control system, such as GitHub, it could be Bitbucket, GitLab, whatever it is, and that's where your team basically pushes code and collaborates on the software that you're building. Now, the way that CircleCI works is that once you push code to your VCS system, that'll fire a webhook over to CircleCI. And CircleCI will detect basically a configuration file they keep within that repository in the form of a YAML, which is not too unusual for a CI tool, and use that to basically build your testing environment, pull in the code, install whatever dependencies you need on that project, run the test suite as you define them, and then actually deploy those to whatever environment you see fit, staging, production, testing environment, whatever it may be. From there, if you are ready basically to have this kind of be an automated process, that's something that can be shipped to production. So I think for the advanced use cases, for example, we see companies and teams that, if all the test cases pass, they're actually immediately being, and it's in the master branch, they're immediately being shipped to production. And so, there's an importance to placing a high level of trust within your tests and to, remove flaky tests as much as possible, because the more you can trust your tests, the more you should have faith in your ability to push to production more frequently, which means smaller code commits, which means iterating more quickly, maybe compared to your competitors, which means fast time to market, which means happier customers, which means more money, which is always good. Great. So I'm going to jump into the demo now and kind of show you some of the key features and concepts through the lens of kind of working through CircleCI, just through the browser for the most part here. So I'm going to change my sharing here. Let's see if this works. All right. Great. So I'm going to start here in GitHub at this project page. So I like to use this demo. And generally, this is where I think most of us live as engineers in terms of working with our code is through GitHub. And I'm going to particularly look at issues. So assuming that I'm using GitHub issues here, I can see that someone has created an issue. I'd like to add some functionality to the service. And if I click in here, I've actually pushed some code ahead of time. So let's just save a little bit of time here. But basically, I've pushed a commit to address this functionality, to add this functionality to the service. And here I can see immediately with the GitHub checks integration that we have with CircleCI that this build is failing. So if I'm to click in here, I can see that my unit test failed within CircleCI. And from within the browser here, I can actually go directly to GitHub, to CircleCI. And those will take me immediately to the build page here. And by going here, CircleCI has automatically highlighted the failing test case here. So it's really quick. I don't have to go digging through the logs basically to see what the issue was. Rather, CircleCI has made a lot easier for me to actually see what the issue was. Now, if I'm interested in seeing, some more details about the steps around this test, I can go over to the steps tab here. And I see that these steps that passed have been collapsed because generally I don't need to see these over and over again. I'm not really concerned for the things that passed. I'm rather more concerned about the things that didn't pass. And so I can see the actual log output here and maybe get some more information that wasn't surfaced to me in the test tab here. Now, if I go to the top of this page here, there's a lot of useful information for me just within this page itself. I can see, for example, who pushes breaking code, which was me, unfortunately. And then I can also get helpful links back to the actual commit and the PR itself, which will take me back to GitHub, as well as the branch. On the left side here, what we'll see is how long the build ran for, how long ago this build ran, and particularly with this executor, which I think is interesting to highlight, which is basically telling me what executor that it ran on. So in CircleCI, one of the key features is the ability from within the config to change the resource class that you're using. So if I had this really heavy lifting job where I'm doing a whole bunch of, I don't know, let's say database read writes and maybe I'm doing some like graphic testing for whatever reason, then I can throw a larger resource class by saying, hey, like I would like to use a large resource class. I'm going to throw like 16 gigs of RAM at this job. But maybe I have on the other hand, I have like a nightly job that's running that's maybe just pulling some dependencies. So I can throw like a really small resource class because I'm not so concerned about the speed of it, for example. And so this is a really good way for me and my team to kind of control my costs by customizing the execution environment based on my need, actually. And by hovering over here, I can see what exactly that medium class means. That means 2 CPUs and 4 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, so I'm going to go back to GitHub now. So if I were to go here, I believe this will take me back. Great. So this takes me back to the issue page, or the pull request, actually. And if I look at this second commit here, I can see here that actually my second commit here passed all my tests. So I can click in here and get some more details on this. So if I were to go into that same unit test job, for example, I'm going to take over the steps page to show me that everything ran successfully. One more thing I'd like to highlight here that I skipped in the last commit was the parallel runs. So you'll see here that I have 2 containers that ran in parallel with each other. And what I basically did here was that because this is unit testing and I have, let's say, 100 tests, instead of running 100 tests in one container, I have the ability to split those 2 tests, or split those 100 tests amongst 2 containers. Now, I didn't say I ran 50 tests per container because not all tests are created the same. I may have one test that takes 5 minutes and the other 99 take 5 minutes themselves. So for that, we have some functionality built in to our CircleCI convenience images that enables you to be able to split tests intelligently based on timing. So basically how this works is you will run these tests once and save the test results, and basically we'll basically save the amount of time it took to run every single unit test of yours. And then on subsequent runs, we'll try our best to actually split those tests based on that historical test timing. So here, we'll see here, there's a difference about 24 seconds. Looking at percentage base is quite big. However, it's not always going to be exactly the same, unfortunately. But however, when we're looking at thousands of tests, for example, it ends up being quite close. And this is something that is really easily configurable, again, within the config.yaml itself. This is not something that you have to build out the functionality from scratch. Okay, so from here, let's see. I will go back again. Let's commit, and let's see. What I would want to highlight here is I'm going to actually merge this pull request to kind of show what this process looks like. So now that I've actually merged this commit into the production stream, into the master branch, what this will actually do is kick off a fresh build within CircleCI. And, oops, wrong page, sorry. So if I were to go here. So for within the CircleCI dashboard here, I can go look at my project as a whole, for example. And here I can see for every single branch, all the different builds that are running or have run in the past. And you can see here that this has actually kicked off a build from the PR. What will look a little different if you're paying really close attention is that here in this previous build of mine, I had these 5 different jobs that were running in my pipeline. However, here in my master branch, I actually have a lot more stuff running. Some of it's not running quite yet because there are dependencies on each other. But this is something that I've configured within the config.yaml itself because I only want to run a packaging and a deploy job, for example, when I'm working in the master branch, right? Like I don't want to be deploying to a production environment if I'm in a feature branch, for example. So while this is running, let me kind of do a new share here. All right. And if I push to the left side, we can see here, this is the config.yaml itself. So we can kind of get a sense of how these things are configured. So here on the left side, we're looking at the workflows, or the pipeline, basically, of how things are running. And on the right side, I can see how this is configured, where I have, for example, let me just pull a better view of this, actually. So if I were to click on this, this is a better a graphical depiction of what's going on. So here I have my unit test, which is running first. If this fails, then none of this, the rest is going to happen. Once the unit test pass, then my coverage test, my static analysis, and the packaging job is actually going to start all at the same time, as well as the browser testing I've set up for Internet Explorer and Chrome. Once this packaging job is completed, it's actually going to ship this off to a dark deploy environment, at which point there's a manual hold placed on that job so that before it actually gets, this is actually a blue-green deployment, before I actually put in the green environment, the production environment, myself, an engineering manager, QA team can actually go around, poke around that dark deploy, and then release it into a production environment if it all looks good. So to show you what that looks like here on the right side on workflows, is I have the unit test here running first. After that, if I turn on my timer here, I have these series of tests that run afterwards, and you'll see that I'm able to basically do that with this require stanza. So this basically says, if I don't put this here, everything's going to run at the same time, basically, which is not what I want. So this is a way for me to basically control the order in which my jobs run. You'll probably also be wondering about the master branch filters. Here, for example, the packaging job runs only on the master branch. It's also possible for just say like basically every branch except for master, something will run. So I can have something that only runs the feature branches. Another powerful way to use this is you could also use git tags as filters as well to do inclusive and exclusive jobs. Going in a little more deeply into unit testing, and I want to kind of show some of how this works here, is we have the unit test job, and this is where I've defined the actual command. So I check out the code. I enable test splitting, as I mentioned earlier. This is using the CircleCI CLI that's built in to the into our convenience images. I'd also like to highlight restoring and saving cache. So here, if I'm installing dependencies every single time, let's say it takes me 5 minutes to install dependencies, that's some time that I don't necessarily need to be spending every time when I'm running these jobs. Maybe my dependencies are not changing very often, and rather it'd be faster to use it through cache. So instead, I'm able to basically restore from a cache so that my installation of dependencies only takes 2 seconds instead of the 5 minutes or however long it would normally take for me to install these dependencies, because they are the same as they have always been. And so the way this works basically is that we actually will create a checksum of whatever file you like. So for here, for example, in a JavaScript project, it'll be a package.json or something of like. So we take a checksum of that, and then we will basically zip up or tar those tar the directories that you define, save those in S3, and that's how we're able to pull this down this quickly. If there's anything that changes, of course, then we can save the cache again, such that the next time you won't have to spend that time again actually installing all those dependencies. Another thing I'd like to point out is the artifact store. So there's a built-in artifactory basically within CircleCI. So if you're running tests, and for example, let's say you have, let's say some documentation that you're building from this job, or maybe some GIFs or some videos for some browser testing. These are things that can be saved into CircleCI and actually accessed from the artifacts tab here. And here I can see that I have just basically some artifacts created so that I can check those out later, or upload those somewhere else. Whatever I need to do with those, I can do. Okay, one more thing I'd like to point out, and I'm going to it'll be a segue into my next session basically, is the basically the orbs. So we'll see here that I've defined a series of orbs here, which is basically pulling in functionality that's already been defined. So for example, for Slack, like I don't want to have to write a whole series, like a whole bunch of commands for notifying myself in a certain channel, right? This is function that's been written, not just myself, but has probably been written several times within the 1 million builds that are being run every day on CircleCI. So let me just kind of segue back and use my slides, because it's probably a better teaching method here. So just new share. All right. So present here. Oops, I skipped ahead. I'm going to go back to this. All right. So with orbs here, Orbs are basically reusable, shareable packages of CircleCI configuration. And so what that means is, we've all worked with libraries before, for example, in JavaScript, any other programming language, where you're pulling in functionality that you don't have to build yourself, because who wants to write a date-time functionality, basically, when someone's already done a much better job of that than you will. And in much the same way, Orbs are packages of CircleCI YAML configuration that contains these predefined commands, executors, jobs that you can reuse easily, that you can share across your team, your organization, so that if you have multiple projects that have the same type of deploy job or the same kind of execution environment, that's not something you have to define individually across 10 projects, and then when it changes, change it again, change it across 10 projects. Rather, you can do it in a centralized manner such that you're reducing the amount of potential friction and breaking changes in certain builds. And maybe to further illustrate what I'm talking about here, we're basically able to define commands, executors, and jobs. So here, by using the say hello command, I can basically define what the command is, maybe have a default here and run a hello Eugene, for example. So here, by defining it, I'm able to basically call it into the job and just say, hey, just run this command, and I've already actually had it defined here, so I don't have to define this again. Or this can be a series of commands even. It could be several steps, for example. I'm also able to do this with execution environments. So if I have a Docker container that's being used across 10 projects, I can, again, define this one place and have it called in to a config easily. I'm going to step backwards now, where I skipped over, to talk a little bit about Cypress. All right. So how we use how CircleCI uses Cypress, actually. So we actually use Cypress today, particularly in some of our front-end UX projects. And we also use the Cypress Orb, actually, that we use to basically create artifacts. So we actually use it to create videos of basic browser testing that's going on. And so what that looks like is, in terms of what we looks like in the output here, is we can see, kind of the test results, a test summary of what's happened. But then also we have these really handy little videos of what's going on. And I know browser testing can be a real pain sometimes to figure out why something is failing. So this is a really, really handy way for us to be able to look back and debug and see maybe where things look a little weird, or perhaps things are failing. We can't understand why. This really gives us an easy way to figure out what's going on. All right, skipping forward a little bit again. All right. So back to Orbs a little bit and Cypress Orbs. Cypress is probably one of our most popular Orbs, actually, that's being used at CircleCI. We have several different types of Orbs. We have what we call partner Orbs, where partners such as Gleb at Cypress, and Postman and JFrog, all these other tools, we have people who are actually dedicated to writing the Orbs and making sure they're up to date with the latest changes that are happening on their side, so that that you're basically getting the most up-to-date functionality with the most updated APIs, and getting that functionality really in an easy-to-use manner. We also have a handful of CircleCI Orbs. These are ones that we write for customers. So we actually have a team of engineers here who are keeping on top of any changes and making sure that you're having the best functionality. Most popular ones probably are the AWS ones. We also have a Node Orb that I think is the most popular, where it's really easy to install and manage maybe different versions of Node and to run like really common commands, testing commands, without having to do that yourself. And on top of that, a whole load of community Orbs that can be contributed by anyone out there, that has a lot of functionality that perhaps falls between the gaps of what we provide and what our partners provide. Okay, this is here as a resource. I won't run through this, but basically this presentation will be available afterwards. So I wanted to make sure that if reading is more your thing, which it is for me, here's a bunch of resources to help you get started with Orbs and how to use reusable config particularly. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Gleb now and give him the remote control.
Well, thank you, Eugene. I really enjoyed your demo and your presentation. So I will speak about concrete example of using a particular orb to accomplish your task. So I'll show how you use CircleCI, Cypress Orb, how you compare it to other tools, and what you can do and how it actually looks in practice from a user standpoint. So let's go. Okay, so here's an example of Cypress end-to-end browser task. You install Cypress with npm install Cypress. That's what you do locally, right? That's part of your normal development pipeline. And then you write a test, and the test is shown here. It's kind of like normal Mocha test, I would say, in JavaScript. You chain all commands of like this global object Cy that we provide, and Cy stands for Cypress. And if you want to visit a website, you say Cy visit, and then you can put a URL or put it in your Cypress JSON file. And then you say, well, find me an element with selector class new to do and type something, followed by enter, and then type something else and something else. And then in this to do MVC application, you should have 3 to do items on the screen. So what you do to check that, you find all elements with class to do, and you say should have length 3, which is an assertion. So that's the test, right? The Cypress typical test. And when you run this, it looks like this. So when you run Cypress locally, it opens a browser, and then you see the test, you see your application on the right side of the screen in your browser. You can actually see the test running and executing all the commands. And then on the left, you see every command like visit, get, type shown in a command log. And the cool thing about Cypress is that you can hover over each command and see how the application looked at that particular moment in time. And you can see how every command actioned or performed its action. Like you can see how typing actually changed the number of to-dos. So this is what you get when you run Cypress locally, and that allows you to run useful tests very, very quickly. Now, we only have 2 commands in Cypress, really. You can do Cypress open, which is what I've shown on the previous slide. That's when you run Cypress interactively. You can see the command log, you can see your browser and the test executing. But when you run your Cypress test on continuous integration service, you want to run Cypress run, which runs your test in non-interactive mode, just goes through every spec file and executes all the tests. And there are certain differences between interactive and non-interactive tests. Like we can take a video of a whole test run, we can take a screenshot and so on. But when you run Cypress on CI, you have a problem. Because what about installing npm dependencies? What about caching like Eugene showed? What about actually preparing your environment and your machine and executor to be able to run Cypress? Because you need certain operating system dependencies. Cypress is an Electron app, so you need all the operating system libraries to run this. So you need to somehow define this executor. What about extra options that you can pass? What if you want to run just certain spec files on CI? Or if you want to run in certain resolution, like how do you pass all those options? So CI configuration is complex, right? And we have long list of examples for every CI, but let's talk about CircleCI. So here's the main difference between configuring CI using CircleCI Orbs versus everything else. With CircleCI Orbs, you allow us, the authors of a tool, in this case, Cypress, to actually help you or like write the CI config for your use, right? We are the author, so we know the tool and all the config options. So we'll write the CI snippets and you can just use them. So when we heard about CircleCI Orbs, we like, yes, we'll jump on board. We'll get on your beta program and we'll write the orb and we'll release it when orbs go public. So we started writing this orb 2 years ago in October of 2018. And as you can see, there's a big spike when we were just writing the first commit, but we kept updating it for the last 2 years. And actually when orbs came out, we actually recorded the first presentation where we just showed our first version of an orb with CircleCI team. So you can look up at the video, look up the slides. So after that, after we've written the first version, we actually written a bunch more versions that you can find in CircleCI Orb registry, right? You can look at everything that we have there. You can find all the previous versions. And you can actually query the number of versions. And at this particular point, when I took the screenshot, it was 32. I think we have more releases after that. We've been iterating. We've been adding features. We've been fixing bugs. So you can actually see that we are taking this orb pretty seriously. So what is the orb? Well, the one thing, if you're the user, you want to see like hello world, or like, how do I use this really easily from a get-go? So in our documentation, our README for the orb, you will see this example. That's the simplest example that we put first. It looks like this. It's a YAML file. All you do, you import our orb, right, under Cypress name, and then in your workflow, under job, you just say Cypress run. And this run comes from our orb. That's what we've written. We've written the definition for our orb job named run. And in our opinion, this hello world example is enough for like 90% of use cases, because this orb will actually define the executor machine that can run Cypress. It will cache dependencies. It will run the tests. That's all pretty much everyone needs, at the beginning especially. So this little snippet is enough to do everything. And the interesting thing is that Circle orbs are really a text macro language. They do text substitution, they expand orb, and they substitute each job with like job definitions that we've written, and they keep expanding. But the cool thing about this is all static processing. So you can install CircleCI CLI tool, and then you can take your CircleCI YAML file and see how does it look if you expand all the orb definitions. So if you do CircleCI config process, it will give you equivalent CircleCI YAML file, but without an orb. So if you didn't even use our orb, and if you didn't write Cypress run, you would have to write all this stuff in green yourself that caches everything. So it's a huge saving in your time, right? And still allows you to do the same thing. So after we show like hello world, we actually show a bunch of stuff in our documentation. All those little, cases, right? We actually cover them in our documentation. So you can see like simple case, then you can see what if I want to do like record test artifacts, what if I want to run things in parallel? And we'll talk about parallel in a second, right? So we show all those examples in the documentation for the orb. But the main thing is we'll show you a useful example right away, and you control everything else through parameters. One thing that you as the user of an orb have to do is you would control how it runs through parameters. And sometimes you don't know like the names of parameters because it might be new, right? So for example, if you say, well, I want to record test artifacts on Cypress dashboard, you might say, well, it probably is recording true, but you're not sure if that flag is correct. Again, the interesting thing about CircleCI orbs is that it's text substitution language. You can check them statically using CircleCI CLI tool. So you can say validate, and Circle will tell you, wait, recording is unknown parameter. Like the authors of Cypress or don't have a parameter named recording. So you can look at the documentation and you will say, oh, it's not recording, it's record. And then you can fix your orbs. But you don't have to run the CI to actually find it out. You can just statically check your YAML configuration file. If you want to record things, right, and put results on our dashboard, just say record true and set environment variable with record key. This is the interesting case. From the get-go, we weren't allowed to run your test in parallel to speed them up. Eugene showed Remember those blocks of code where you say split all my spec timings, spec files by timings? So you can do the same thing using our orb, but without any bash processing spec files. You just say parallel true and just say parallelism number of machines. And the whole orb will define machines, and you'll see them running in parallel in our dashboard. For example, you want to run things faster, just say, I want more machines. From 4, you can go to 4 is the limit for open source projects by default. For paid private projects, you can just say as much as you want, right? We are on performance plan, so we can go, I think, up to 200 machines, so which is really nice. We can really finish all the tests very quickly. The lesson we learned is that you, as the user, really want to learn from examples. So our orb includes so many examples, and I highlight them in green right here because you really want to copy paste things. You don't want to like code them from scratch or find them. Like we really provide a lot of examples. And once you're done providing examples, probably write more examples. We've done more examples than I think anyone finds necessary, but we want every example to be copy pastable. And we actually put all those examples in the orb file. So that means that we actually process every orb and all the examples to make sure it's correct before we publish the orb, because we don't want you to actually use our orb and find it doesn't work. Another thing that we've done in our orb documentation, we created a markdown document with longer recipes. So we actually link to our repos where we show those examples and actions. For example, how do you run unit tests, then end-to-end tests, then, for example, publish something to NPM. So we show all these things in our documentation as more like real examples. So Eugene showed how nice it is to be able to look at the video of a test run. If you use our orb, all you have to do is just say store artifacts and set it to true. And this will store the video, which Cypress takes by default, and screenshots on failures, and it will store it as test artifacts using CircleCI test artifact tab. And then you can find it. So that example that Eugene showed before, how Circle runs end-to-end tests, right? And we showed that they control the cache themselves, restore it later, run things. The equivalent CircleCI orb complete thing is shown here. You want to execute Cypress run job that we've written, and you want to install using yarn lock, saying yarn true. You want to use custom command for running tests. So you pass command and you say store artifacts true. And it's the entire config file. There's nothing else. It will run the same way. If you want to generate reports and store particular folders, you can do that. And the interesting thing about this is that if you create, for example, code coverage report, which is a static folder, you can define additional store artifacts and you can store them after you run Cypress run. And then, for example, in Cypress, you will see the code coverage has been generated, and then you will see inside Circle UI a static folder that you can just click on, and it opens index.html, serves the static HTML site, and then you can see your code coverage. You don't have to pay for extra service. You can just store those test reports and see them inside Circle directly. And then you can zoom inside each file and see which files, which lines were executed. You know, where everything is linked. So Circle links to Cypress dashboard, Cypress dashboard links back to the Circle run. So one thing, remember that Eugene showed like the job definition where several jobs depended on each other. We built Cypress test runner using Circle. And we build it on Circle on 2 platforms. We build it on Mac, which shows like it's a simple workflow, but for Linux, because we run so many test jobs, because we want to test Cypress in all ways possible, you can see on the left, we have a giant graph of jobs where we run all the tests, and once the test pass, we go to the next level of tests and the next level of apps. So we actually use Circle a lot to actually build Cypress and test it. Out of that 1 million builds a day, we probably consume half of it, Gene, to be honest, but it's okay. We love it. One thing that we do after we build Cypress Test Runner, we actually kick off a bunch of other repositories, and all those repositories try to use this new preview version, and they report back using GitHub checks the status back to original build. So we actually run pretty much to the limit of GitHub checks just to make sure that we see how each build behaves with respect to other examples. So we love the CircleCI Orb syntax. I think it's excellent. Ability to extract reusable commands out of bash scripts, to create reusable jobs and orbs is unbelievable superpower. You don't even have to use Circle or any external orbs to refactor your own config files to actually use commands, jobs, and orbs. You can do it yourself inside a single Circle YAML file and still benefit from this nice refactoring way of writing your CI configuration. So we actually have written a bunch of CI wrappers. So CircleCI Orb by far is the most powerful one. We compare it to GitHub Action, like Netlify plugins and so on. But CircleCI Orb allows you to define the executor, the machine, how many machines you want to spin, and all other things. So we have a bunch of parameters like that you can control to define the execution, right? Which no other CI config tool allows you to do. So it's kind of nice balance of simplicity and power. So if you remember anything, this is how easy it is to run full browser tests using CircleCI Cypress Orb. That's it. That's the whole config. Thank you. And Eugene, let's answer any questions. If not, we'll just chat.
Sounds good. All right. I'm going to pop over here to the Q&A. See what we got here. Oh, hold on. I can't see it. 1 second. There we go. All right. Hi, Eugene. Understand the orb surfaced in 2.0 pipeline script. I started with 2.0 pipeline. Was wondering if there's any shortcut to migrate the 2.0 pipeline, or do we have to rewrite? All right. Great question. So from 2.0 to 2.1, there was some, I think it was more additive than subtractive. So I don't think that you'll really need to do anything to migrate. Honestly, there's not like much difference. In fact, what 2.1 would enable you to do, the biggest change would be to enable reusable config, for example, orbs. So 2.1 is required for you to be able to use functionality such as orbs and reusable config. There might be some small changes, but I don't think, I think that's kind of like case by case. Like it's not, to my knowledge off the top of my head, there might be like a couple small things, but it doesn't affect most users. So I think really the easiest way to do it would just change it to 2.1 and see what breaks. And that I would just go with there. But yeah, there's not much. There's not like a significant change was what I would say to that.
And Eugene, if I can add,
yeah,
I always enjoyed CircleCI validate, right? Config validate and then circle.yaml, because it allows me to actually check my syntax locally. So if you suspect that you're gonna break, just change your version from 2.0 to 2.1, run CircleCI config validate locally, and you'll know right away if something's broken. So you don't even have to push the code.
That's a great plug, Gleb, actually. So what Gleb is alluding to there is we have a CircleCI CLI that you can download locally onto your machine. And from there, there's most handy function probably is the ability to validate your config without having to push code and then wait for that feedback and potentially use credits. But there's also I guess if you were interested in building your own orb as well, I would highly recommend downloading the CircleCI CLI as well, in order to basically validate and work through that process. It's also the exact same CLI that's built into our convenience images. So it's kind of a way to play around with that functionality as well.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. Let me try to translate this a little. I need to ask what's
Can I answer that, please?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Okay,
the C++
so
question.
the question says that C++ compilation of code is slow. So what happens, right? Eugene actually addressed it. In his demo, he showed that you can change the type of machine that you're using for like your workflow or every job, right? So by default, it's like a medium-sized machine with like, I think 2 GB of RAM, right? But if you look at CircleCI documentation, you will see that you have a choice. You can go from small machine to medium, which is default, to large, to extra large, and I think they even have like custom sizes above that. So if you find that your heavy C++ compilation is slow, try larger machine, right? See if it speeds up. If not, maybe try extra large machine. And if it's still slow, then you probably are compiling like the whole internet. So in that case, you probably want to do something else. But honestly, look at the demo, right? Eugene had Java program, and yet spinning up machine took 5 seconds, and then every step took like 0 or like 5 seconds. It was pretty incredible. And we found ourselves that Circle has pretty fast machines that spin quickly, download the cache quickly, unzip the cache quickly. These are like pretty serious, pretty serious hardware with nice, fast, things on top. So if going to the larger machine doesn't solve your problem, then you have something custom going on, and you probably have to debug it better, right, Eugene?
Kind of said it better myself. Thanks, Gleb. It's a great answer. I guess I'll add one on the subject of like different machines and different resource classes. If it's really still not meeting your needs, there's also a GPU resource class. So if you want to throw like a gigabyte of RAM at a problem, and you can absolutely do so. But I think at that point, probably better to kind of look back and make sure this is what you want to be kind of running on CircleCI at the same time.
Right.
There's a mention, so I'm going to kind of link that question we just answered in the next one, asking if there's like a simple plugin. And this next question here is asking if there's, this person is working a React project, has Cypress end-to-end tests, has AWS Amplify auth integration via Cognito, Google authentication, and is it able to run CircleCI?
Right.
So I think the question that may be being asked here is basically, are there plugins, or is there like functionality built in, or how do I bring this functionality into CircleCI? And the answer to that basically is that we don't have plugins at CircleCI. Like we kind of like, I think coming from a Jenkins type world where, we're used to, managing your build fleet, installing plugins, and then like having to add on functionality to make things work the way you want to. That's not the way we think about it, philosophically speaking, at CircleCI, and realistically speaking at CircleCI. So the way I like to basically describe it is that, we basically try to make it easy for users to like spin up a machine that they want. And here is your machine with a base like execution environment, whatever it is that you need to actually run it on. Beyond that, it is just a machine that you can run whatever it is you want to run on there. You can download whatever you need to download on there. There's not limitation unless you're trying to build, mine Bitcoin, then that's no good, and we'll ban you for that. But otherwise, if it has an API, it can work with CircleCI. So particularly your question on Google authentication, working with AWS, those are things that if you need to, you can install, for example, the AWS CLI or the Google CLI onto the machine to run. Or even better, you could use the AWS Orb or the Google Cloud Orb to really simplify the process. So instead of having to hunt down how that CLI runs and then installing it and then make sure keeping on top of that, you can just use the Orb, pull that and say install AWS CLI. boom, you're done. AWS CLI authenticate, right? And you just pass in as parameters the different keys that you need or the different values that you need into there, and then CircleCI and the Orb will take care of the rest of that for you.
And I can add that if a person asking a question has a trouble logging into a website that uses like AWS Cognito, right, authentication model, then yes, it's pretty sore point in Cypress because we don't allow you to go from domain to domain to domain or like multiple redirects in order to authenticate. So we're working on that. There are a couple of Cypress workarounds and solutions, but we're trying to create a documented way for every authentication system to actually work from your end-to-end system. But usually it involves doing API call and getting a token, setting it in your browser, and then continuing the test from there. So it's not easy, but we hope to make it a little bit simpler for your end-to-end tests.
Right. Okay. Any other
Eugene, can I ask a question, right? Like,
yeah.
What do you think is in store, right? Where our Orbs are going next, or what's like the future for Orbs is like?
Ooh, future for Orbs.
Because we've seen that there are lots of Orbs built by Circle team, right? There are partner Orbs and community Orbs where people just write their own Orbs. Everyone can write their own Orb, right? Do you think that the future is just more Orbs, or is there something in like CircleCI 3.0 that's gonna be different?
Ooh. I don't want to scare people about talking about a potential CircleCI 3.0 and have them rewrite their configs. There was,
Exactly.
yeah, to do that all over again. I'm not sure if we would, the company's brave enough to do something like that again. That being said, though, with Orbs, I don't see there being like a significant change in Orbs anytime in the near future. I think that model continues. I mean, that partner model and the community like participation, has been growing over time. I don't see us starting to build in certain functionality, for example. But I mean, maybe one thing that we do is if there's a community org that's really, really popular and there's some functionality there that perhaps would be better for us to support natively within CircleCI. I think that's something that we are paying attention to. We definitely pay attention to orb usage and what kind of functionality is most useful there. And I think it's just a really good way for us to kind of get feedback or just see like real usage of the platform and like how what people are trying to fix on their own rather than relying, on CircleCI's kind of functionality, built-in functionality. So, I think in that way, it's like a really good way for us to just, it's another way for us to understand our users better more than anything else.
Great, great. I'm thinking like now that you went through UI, right, improvements, right? So now the UI version 2 can show like arbitrary complexity graphs and it looks nice and it's pretty snappy, right? I'm thinking if I can suggest, right, something, maybe a visual way to maybe edit your CircleCI config file, right? Because now everything is organized in workflows and jobs and commands. Imagine if you can maybe change the parameters for a job like visually right there in your UI, right? You see that 4 machines is not enough and you drag it and it's like, give me 20 machines now and run this job again, right? That would be interesting.
I mean, that's like a really interesting trend, right? That's something that we've been talking about a little bit internally has been the whole no code movement.
Right.
And I think it's really fascinating. Like, I think it's kind of funny how we've kind of come back full circle to that type of thing, right? Because it used to be like that, and then we're like, no, we need to be able to customize it. So then we start doing like YAML and all these things, and now we're kind of coming back to it. I would love to see it. I mean, like I love throwing ideas at our product team to start working on, but as we know, that's not always going to get picked up. But yeah.
Well, if you are in any kind of discussions or any kind of push, we are there for you, right? We'll be happy to chat and we'll be happy to try and have our orb being like a guinea pig where we're like, let's experiment. We'll help you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Club.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to look through. Okay, I was looking through the chat. I don't see anything out there. So we have a couple minutes left. So I guess no more questions here. I guess we can start wrapping up, Gleb. So Gleb, thank you for taking the time today to join us for this webinar. I definitely learned a couple things about Cypress I didn't know before, even though I've watched a recording of your webinars before. So that was fantastic. And thank you for the support for CircleCI as well. I really much appreciate that. And for being a great co-host.
Thank you for inviting me. It was really a pleasure.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to leave this open for just a second to keep these links up here. There should be a survey being sent out after this. So for all of you watching, please fill it out. It really gives us an opportunity to improve these sessions going forward. Otherwise, and I think there's an opportunity to win a free t-shirt here too, I saw. So that's always fun as well. Otherwise, we will continue pumping out content like this. So hope to see you at the next one. And happy building, everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care.